Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of All Access AM. I'm Billy Embody. Thanks for joining us on this Friday. Had a little shakeup, had a little travel changes on Thursday, so couldn't do the show like we normally do Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, 7 to 8 a.m. Central, 8 to 9 a.m. Eastern Time. But we are here with plenty to talk about on this edition of All Access AM. And we have a special guest, Stephen Wagner, who's going to join us at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time for those Miami fans looking for some transfer portal news and kind of all of that is going on with Mario Cristobal's program right now as they look to reload Miami and chase another national championship game appearance and maybe an ACC championship as well. But we have a lot to get to on the transfer portal news as well across college football in the ACC. Teams battling for players here ahead of classes really getting going. Those final days for most schools before the ad drop date is nearing. And so there's a lot of positioning, a lot of chasing going on. We'll talk about Duke as well. They have emerged for a quarterback to maybe solve their portal needs as far as who's going to be their quarterback because Darian Mensah, the Duke quarterback, is still being sued by the school for breach of contract, kind of all the legal jargon you want to look at there and what Darian Mensah is doing entering the transfer portal. Miami believed to be the favorite there. But of course, the Hurricanes couldn't just stop there. They had to go and target Duke's top receiver. We'll talk about all that and what it means over the course of this podcast. I'll talk some Duke. We'll talk some Miami with Stephen Wagner, but we do have a lot to talk about on that front. And ACC basketball, of course, another weekend is here. We'll preview that slate, some changes to game times due to the winter storm that is moving in. But boy, what a slate for those of you who are going to be cooped up inside this cold weekend across the country. I'm Billy Embody, happy to be here with you guys. We are presented by our friends at Horn Legend. I'm wearing one of their pullovers, but I tell you what, if you're sitting there at home and you're cold this weekend, think about how warm you could have been with one of Horn Legend's jackets. They have an incredible selection for men, women on the jacket front. That's been a revelation of sorts for my wife and I as we've been able to acquire some of these jackets from our friends at Horn Legend. And we got them thanks to free shipping with code PONY. That gets you guys those hooked up on the jacket front. So just tell them that On the Pony Express sent you as well. But Horn Legend has these great jackets as well as the pullovers, and they continue to take it to a new level with their collegiate gear that continues to expand day by day. It seems like each ACC school continues to get new gear on the site. So appreciate our friends at Horn Legend, luxury brand there. Really appreciate their support of the podcast and you guys for supporting them as well. It helps us when we go to other sponsors and say, hey, well, look at the success we've had here. Look at the success we've had there. We appreciate you guys supporting us with our friends at Horn Legend. They keep this show running, one of our multiple sponsors we've got to thank for the show. Let's dive into transfer portal and kind of set the stage here because really now we should see for the most part transfer portal entries really stopping and schools were able to wait until Tuesday, Wednesday to enter players into the transfer portal. We saw a few pop up maybe on Thursday as well because schools are allowed 2 business days to enter players into the transfer portal. So those last minute Friday afternoon, Friday night players that entered the portal, with the Darian Mensah drama, for example, weren't required to be entered into the portal until 2 business days later. So that would be Wednesday at midnight for most schools, I assume. And so we've got now the portal closed, and that includes for grad transfers, that includes for different players across college football that might have different things that they want to try and challenge in the NCAA system. The idea here is that the portal is closed. So you can now have your board firmly set across college football for these final spots if you're still chasing them. And there are some schools that are still chasing spots and chasing players to round out their roster. We appreciate you guys being with us. Mr. Lev, I don't even know. Hi, Tarita Ranch. Appreciate you being here on mobile with us as well. Thanks for jumping in the chat. We do have the transfer portal rundown that we'll get to here. And I really want to look at Duke, because Duke has been a team that, has been under fire in the final days of the transfer portal, really because of Miami. In a sense, you've got the Darian Mensah drama, you've got the Cooper Barcade drama now, and we'll get to all that now as we look at what Duke is doing here and trying to get back on the right side of things as best they can. But let's start with Duke. Duke quarterback Darian Mensah did enter the transfer portal on Friday. He was formally into the portal from the school side of things on Wednesday night, and he is not allowed. This is where it gets complicated. Darian Mensah is not allowed to enroll at a new institution before his preliminary injunction in the case on February 2nd. Miami would have to work him in there after their ad drop date. I'm not sure about their whole enrollment status and whatnot, but the temporary order does not bar him from taking official visits, which he is expected to take. So it will be interesting to watch what happens there, because that is something where Duke could really drag this out. One would think, and make and really kind of ruin Miami's plan as best they could, and see what that yields. Would that yield Darian Mensah ending up somewhere else? Would this be a Nico Iamaleava type of scenario where Duke wouldn't be able to, or Duke would lose their big name quarterback, but that big name quarterback would go on to have kind of this tumultuous new process of finding a place to go? Or does he just end up at Miami? That's the more likely scenario, in my opinion. But how long does Duke drag this out and make this a fight, make this a legal issue before saying, okay, we've caused enough pain. We're either able to recoup some money in a settlement. We're able to, just drop this and move on. We've got a new quarterback. We're going to let this go. Or, Manny Diaz and company. I mean, I would imagine there's no reason that they're not going to fight and just play this out and see if they can't tie up Miami in a lot of issues here around Darian Mensah. So that is where Darian Mensah's recruitment stands. But On3's Pete Nakos, one of the authorities on the college football transfer portal, did report that San Jose State quarterback Walker Eget is the front runner for Duke in that regard to replace Darian Mensah. And that would be kind of a pretty decent option for them to get into the fold, because he's one of the top available arms in the transfer portal still. But San Jose State struggled last year. Walter Eget, though, is a really talented passer. He had a career high 3,047 yards passing, 17 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, completed 59% of his passes. Maybe this season was a blip in the road for him. He did throw for 473 yards against Stanford. And maybe he is going to find a more stable program, a better situation at Duke, and end up being that guy for the Blue Devils that steps into that offense for offensive coordinator Johnny Brewer over there, and gets things on track, even if Darian Mensah is going to formally depart. Look, we've seen the quarterback contract situation play out in a difficult manner for a lot of these schools or not many of them, but Damon Williams quickly returned to Washington. I don't think Darian Mensah is going to do that. It seems like a very, very, very different feeling around this one. But if Duke can come away with another program starting quarterback, even dipping down into the group of 5, group of 6 ranks, that's something they're going to have to do to just go ahead and address the position, because Duke does not have a good quarterback situation. But after Darian Mensah, it was Darian Mensah and nobody else. So they have been able to position themselves to get Walker Eget into um, their program, if they do end up pushing that regard, I would imagine they would go ahead and just take him and then let the chips fall where they may. And if that means you have him and Darian Mensah at least on your payroll next year, I mean, that would be a huge win for Duke just to deal a blow to Miami and, land a quarterback who's actually going to play for you. That's going to be another piece of this fascinating scenario. What if Duke ends up having Darian Mensah on its payroll and he doesn't play? What if Duke, doesn't see Darian Mensah see the field elsewhere in college football in 2026? That is maybe because lawyers are involved. Some wild, wild scenario that could happen. But again, really, I expect Darian Mensah to be taking the field as a Miami Hurricane in 2026, chasing another strong season for Mario Cristobal and company. And what a bad situation, though, for the ACC as a whole. And let me walk that back. I don't necessarily know if it's a bad look for the ACC as a whole, but there's got to be uh, some sort of move the commissioner can do here to at least I don't want to say reprimand, but you know, he's gonna get I would think he's gonna get asked about this in spring meetings in Amelia Island, or even, when the media once again gathers in Charlotte for ACC Media Days. This is a really ugly ACC on ACC crime that would bolster one of the top brands in the league that just played for a national championship, that is also very blatantly going after the players it wants in the portal, and going after them in a way that I would say is skirting the rules or the guidelines that are in place. And at the same time, that is also what the system allows. So how is the ACC commissioner, when you ultimately are going to get asked about that somewhere down the line, how do you balance that type of a situation, an issue that is presenting league members? Because this doesn't have the same feeling as some of these other players that, a Chris Johnson Jr. from SMU transferring to Clemson, or a uh, Florida State, transfer leaving and going somewhere else. It just, none of that feels like what Darian Mensah and Duke and Miami are all going through together right now. And we certainly didn't really see this, situation unfold uh, really for this league in any other sense. And so it's disappointing for the league, I think, and that's what I think most people struggle with as they try to make sense of this. The rules allow it, but the rules also, have a deal where this shouldn't technically be what is unfolding as far as the payments and the contracts and all of these things. So I thought that was the idea of contracts. You sit there and you honor them and you go through them. So Duke and Miami are certainly dealing with that. But the harder thing, I think, too, is that Duke lost for their next quarterback, their leading receiver, to the transfer portal, and he's expected to end up at Miami at this point with one season of eligibility left. Cooper Barcade transferred to Duke last offseason from Harvard, and he ended up having an 1,100-yard season and 7 touchdowns in 14 games in 2025. And now you not only lost your quarterback, which would have been a brutal blow already, but you now have a offense that loses one of its top playmakers. At least you have Nate Shepard coming back. You have your top, running back that you would expect to be an all ACC type of player next year. But that is a really difficult, deal for Duke to go through as well. So Duke is going through it. There's no question about that. And for the most part, it's been caused by, Miami. And so that's something that I think is going to be interesting to watch unfold. Is how does Duke respond? How does Duke answer this and get back, on the right side of this for the 2026 season, where they will look at, being another team that could be now in sleeper mode, and and that comes up after a season where you were going into the offseason, you were going into 2026, looking at them as probably one of the top teams in the ACC with Darian Mensah coming back, but instead Mensah ends up entering the portal, and now everything is thrown into a complete and utter, um, just shocking change, and it's disappointing if you're Duke. So, uh, we'll see how it all plays out for the Blue Devils. They did add Billy Dahl earlier this month, a running back transfer from Yale. So they did go into the Ivy League there and add Yale 6'1", 220-pounder who ran for 440 yards last year for Yale and now comes over to Duke. So they did add some running back depth there, maybe just try and shore up that position a little bit, but Duke is certainly going through it. Aviation 1436 says pony up. Appreciate you being here on All Access AM with us on this Friday morning. We'll change in the normal rotation for the show with some travel issues yesterday. But nonetheless, a couple other news here on the transfer portal side of things. Cal linebacker Luke Farrelly, who did transfer from Cal to Clemson, some more ACC on ACC crime there, did end up entering the transfer portal. He is now headed to Ole Miss, who lost a bunch of linebackers, lost their top transfer portal linebacker commit actually to FSU and Chris Jones from Southern Miss. They now get a replacement at that top linebacker spot in Luke Farrelly, and he is headed to the SEC now. So Dabo Sweeney learning this transfer portal can be pretty brutal out there this time of year. So we will see if Clemson can add another linebacker late in the cycle here. And as we look at some of these other players that are in the portal, some other things to watch here, and we'll talk a lot about this with Stephen Wagner of On3, covers Miami for the Hurricanes here and what they're going after with their top targets in the transfer portal. But there is kind of that final push here as players are getting into the portal. They're now in and they're taking those visits and they're able to go down that line and kind of find their next spot. Samuel Akunlola out of Colorado, a transfer offensive lineman, former blue chip prospect who's a big name early on in the recruiting rankings and ended up kind of slipping late, but he is headed to Virginia Tech. So he adds some depth to the Hokies for this 2026 season. Defensive lineman, I should say, not offensive lineman, but somebody who played in all 13 games in 2024. And then this past season, kind of just took a step back in a sense when he missed the final 11 games due to injury. So he's looking to bounce back from injury and get into the fold right away. That could be a good little scouting piece for James Franklin and company there to get him into the fold and get him going right away. Clemson wide receiver Tristan Smith is pursuing another year of eligibility. He filed lawsuit against the NCAA on Wednesday, so he is going to take a stab at getting back onto the field for the Tigers, and he is arguing on the basis that his junior college season, his career was just should not count. So he's kind of taken the Diego Pavia route of challenging some of the NCAA eligibility rulings around junior college ranks. So that is going to be interesting to watch unfold. I can't imagine we see many of these get approved and whatnot. It's just the NCAA is kind of starting to take a little bit of a stand against some of that stuff. And I think eventually we've got to draw the line and kind of get back to the 5 years. We saw the coaches, allow the red shirt rule to change from 4 to 9, which is really just an idea to get to 5 for 5, which is really kind of on track with, academics and things like that to get a degree and give you that extra year in case anything happens. But we're way past COVID now. It's time for all the different reasons and excuses and all of the different things for athletes to get 6, 7, 8 years to kind of like settle in. I really feel like outside of injury, we're kind of past all this now, and it's time to kind of lock back in here and move on. Speaking of moving on, you get to this weekend, you move on from your work week, and what do you want? Maybe you want to have a nice cocktail, and you want to celebrate a great work week, or cheers to this, or celebrate that. We'll do it with our friends at Socorro. Socorro Tequila. You can get free shipping on 3 bottles or more when you go to SocorroTequila.com. The link is in the episode description below. Socorro is an award-winning tequila that is just agave, water, and yeast. Very clean, very simple. The Blanco, the Añejo, the Reposado, really incredible stuff there from Socorro. That is now an award-winning tequila company, and we appreciate them for supporting All Access AM. Make sure you check out their 5-year extra Añejo. You can get that shipped right to your front door. The tasting notes on this one, beautiful agave notes at first, followed by elegant notes of oak, aged maple, prunes, and smoked spices. It is a limited edition special bottle, really beautiful there. That one can sit out on your countertop or in your liquor cabinet. That maybe is a focal point of displaying some special bottles. This is a part of only 3 barrels made. This is celebrating Socorro's 5th anniversary. This is a super rare bottle, so this isn't just a premium tequila. It's a milestone that honors Socorro's journey. So make sure you check out their 5-year extra Añejo Reserva de Pablo. You can order it, and it just only takes a couple clicks too. So get free shipping on 5 bottles or more with our friends at Socorro, and enjoy that this weekend. They've got some cocktail recipes on there as well. Stephen Wagner of On3 joins All Access AM in about 10 minutes. So we'll get to some Canes talk. I know we've had a lot of it already. We are closing the book on college football season. We'll start getting into program by program dives into what these teams acquired in the transfer portal, what they're going after, as far as position battles that need to be won, players that need to step up, where guys fit. And we'll be kind of jumping around the ACC. And I'm really hoping to set up some things with different schools around, maybe having some players having some coaches, things like that. We do want to have a couple other notes here. Purdue tight end transfer Rico Walker did sign with Cal as well. So he comes into this Cal program as a kind of under the radar type of player, 6'3", 250-pounder, started his career at Auburn. This past year, he had 9 receptions for 100 yards on the year. He has 2 years of eligibility remaining, if my count is accurate there. So that could be a nice piece for Tosh LaPoy and that offensive staff and everybody to get involved kind of early on and get him in the mix. So Cal did add Rico Walker, and that is kind of, for the most part, the only transfer news outside of what we'll talk about with Miami here in just a little bit. But guys are still able to commit. Guys are able to take visits and do all of those things. And so keep an eye on all of that as there's still drama to be had here in the final days here of the transfer portal before classes really settle in and all of that. So lots to dive into if you're a college football fan watching these rosters unfold. And top 25s are coming out too, way too early ones. And you know what? It's kind of a shame that we're seeing some of these, because the ACC is not one. The ACC, I must say this the right way. The ACC kind of has a marketing problem. They've got to find ways to market these transfers, market how good these teams are getting, because you have another league, Big 12 is really kind of the primary competition in this, that just seems like they do a better job of this. And I think there's a way for the ACC to kind of dive into this more and get the word out that, hey, Miami's going to be good next year. Clemson's buying in. Clemson might bounce back. They won their final 5 games of the regular season. SMU's doing its thing. They've been a model of consistency at a high level in this league. You have Wake coming off a good year. Virginia's trying to figure things out. They've got a quarterback now. All these different things that when you look at what happened at the end of the year, and yeah, Virginia did this and still won their bowl game. Duke finished strong, won their bowl game. SMU finished strong, won their bowl game. You start looking at these top 25s. Well, voters, because you see some of these, top these inflated schedules, you see them just kind of place some of these teams in there towards the back half, really. That, yeah, like Utah is. I've seen them as a top 25 team. They've lost a ton of players. They lost their coach. It's going to be a really interesting deal to see that unfold. Uh, and yet they're getting kind of benefit of the doubt. I've seen Florida be mentioned as a top 25 team. So yeah, that is just wild behavior after what we kind of saw from the Gators this year, and again, a coaching change, and I think John Summerall is going to do a good job there. But come on now, like, what are we doing? I just don't understand it. And at the same time, you see some other programs like obviously at Georgia Tech. You see what happened to their offensive staff, and Haynes King is gone. They're out of a lot of most top 25s. Oklahoma State is getting top 25 buzz. Gosh, you know what? It's a lot more of a team game than just adding your highly touted quarterback and running back from your previous school. I mean, I'm sorry. And just because Kurt Signetti is the way he is and did what he did at James Madison, there's a lot more to it. So the ACC needs a little bit more respect, and they need to find a way because they have stability, which isn't always viewed as strength. They have stability in coaching. They have stability in for the most part their rosters outside of the Duke Miami debate, and that has to be kind of galvanized a little bit more for this league to get this offseason buzz that some of these other programs get. So gotta figure that out if you're the ACC. Got to find a way to make this league a bigger talking point for many analysts around the country. So since we last talked on Tuesday morning, there's been some basketball played. Stephen Wagner is joining us in just a second. NC State did go to Clemson and beat the Tigers. Will Wade getting a win against his alma mater, 80-76 in overtime. Just an incredible moment for Will Wade, I'm sure, to get that win. It's been an up and down all over the place season for NC State, but Will Wade gets a very important win for him personally against the Clemson Tigers, his alma mater, as his Wolfpack get that one done. Florida State knocked off Miami Tuesday night, 65-63. Got to be a disappointing night if you're Jai Lucas, losing that one to the Seminoles that earned their first ACC win. SMU went on the road at Wake Forest and won 91-79 on Tuesday night. A dominant offensive performance by SMU. They were able to get scoring, at a high clip once again from BJ Edwards and shut down Cal Meese and did all of those things that they needed to. And really, this game was a 23-point margin at one point. So nice quality quad one win for SMU on the road. Notre Dame at North Carolina. UNC bounced back 91-69. Pitt at BC Wednesday night, 65-62. Goes the way of Boston College. They get it done. Man, Pitt is struggling. Both of those teams are struggling, but BC gets the win. Virginia Tech beat Syracuse 76-74. That one drops the Qs to 12-7 overall, 3-3 in ACC play. We will talk about the Saturday slate on the other side of our conversation with Stephen Wagner of On3, who's joining us in just a moment. But do want to say this about the North Carolina situation that is going on. Hubert Davis and what they focused on. Last week he said the making mistakes in back-to-back possessions really hurt them. They would turn the ball over, get back on defense, give a three, get to the free throw line, miss those free throws, come back, give up a 1-and-1. It was just letting the previous play affect the team. And that's what Hubert Davis and his staff really honed in on, is moving forward, not letting the past affect you. And that was really important for them to get back on the right side of things earlier this week with that win at home. Again, not a huge accomplishment when it came to beating Notre Dame, but you do get a win and get on the right side of things going into this weekend. So now we're excited to be joined by Stephen Wagner of On3, and who covers the Miami Hurricanes, a obviously fun college football playoff run for Stephen Wagner and the Cane Sport crew. And Stephen, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us, man. Good to see you.
Thanks, Billy. Good to see you again too. Yeah, still trying to come down a little bit from that national championship run. Man, things have been absolutely just beyond chaotic. Obviously, you had the championship on Monday, but now you are trying to squeeze a ton of portal recruiting and a ton of just recruiting in general into a very, very, very short window because obviously Miami's having to battle enrollment deadlines. And while other teams were out there being able to go ahead and get a jump on the guys that they're going to want in next year's class and the guys that they're going to want on next year's team via the portal, Miami's backs have been against the wall a little bit, and they've kind of been having to, really go all in and scrap with as many guys or for as many guys as they've been able to. Obviously, they landed Damian Wilson on Wednesday. Thursday. That was a really, really big pickup. It was one that we kind of saw coming, but it still, addresses a huge position of need considering that Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor are going to be out the door. But now the Hurricanes are still in the mix, and this time in a court case with Darian Mensah, and it's looking like they'll probably try to make a run at Cooper Barcade at some point too. Things are definitely heating up.
And and when we look at Miami and those needs, Damon Wilson is really expected to be a difference maker. He's a well-traveled now player who started at Georgia, ended up at Missouri. He's gone through a little bit of a legal battle with Georgia as well. So something about the Canes and those legal battles so far with portal guys, but nonetheless, he is a massive pickup on the defensive end side of things for this Miami team that really was able to have arguably the best defensive line in college football this year. And when you look at the rest of this roster, where are some of the other important holes that they're looking to fill as they get into these final days before that ad drop date?
Well, really, this isn't going to be a very big portal class for Miami at all. I've been telling our subscribers I expect the final number to be somewhere around 10-ish total guys out of the transfer portal, which really isn't anything whenever you consider teams like Texas are going to take 20, teams like LSU are probably taking somewhere in the 25 range. Ohio State's probably going to end up with around 15 or so. Texas Tech, they're doing another remake of the roster. I think they'll probably be at like 20 or 25 or somewhere around there. So Miami really is not going to need that many portal needs, or is not really going to turn to the portal for that many needs. There are going to be some positions where they, maybe need, a really good backup, or, maybe they need a little bit of depth. One or two spots here where they do need a bona fide starter. Quarterback's obviously one of them. But collectively, this is not going to be that big of a portal class. And a large reason for that is Miami's recruited the high school level really, really well over Cristobal's 4 years. You now have 4 full high school recruiting classes that you've been able to recruit. The guys that you recruited in your first full class in 2023 coming into this year, they are going to be seniors now. So the talent on your roster is now completely homegrown, and you can see their recruiting rankings from the 2023 season up until this year. They've consistently finished, top 5, top 10, top 15. They've really been up there. They feel pretty good about most of the guys that they've been able to get. And now it's kind of time for them to prove that, yeah, we are developing this talent. We are ready to go. Now, hopefully that won't turn out kind of the way that it did for Texas last year, whenever Texas felt really good about some of the homegrown talent and they chose to have a small portal class, and it turned out that they completely misevaluated their roster. But I think with where the Hurricanes sit, they feel really, really good about the guys that have been kind of developing behind the scenes. I think they feel really good about the depth. They've been patient with a lot of these guys, kind of allowing them to, have those reps in practice. Stay away from media attention or critiques or anything like that. And I think that this year, it finally ought to be kind of their moment.
And one position that is turned into a portal position for Miami is quarterback. Emory Williams signed with East Carolina. He transferred out of the program. He went 1-1 as a starter, as a true freshman, but is now leaving the program, heading out with the news that Miami is pursuing Darian Mensah, and the expectation is at some point you would think Miami's going to get Darian Mensah and get him as their next quarterback. But what is your take on this legal battle just as a whole? Like, is this Duke trying to draw this out so he can't enroll for spring? How is Miami having to attack all of this?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and honest to God, this is something that you have to ask a legal expert about. And so this has been kind of what we've been doing here over the last couple of days. Excuse me. I think probably what's going to end up being most likely what this is probably going to head towards is some sort of settlement. Duke's in kind of a, or excuse me, Mensah's in kind of a unique situation because Duke does own his NIL rights, which means that if Miami were to get him, they would have to pay him through their rev share or through the money that they're getting from the rev share agreement. Now, as far as if he'll actually be able to enroll, I think he probably will end up enrolling. Now, there's a temporary restraining order that says that he's able to actually go into the portal. He's able to actually go on visits, but he's not able to go ahead and enroll. And yeah, this is really playing out. I think this is probably going to end up playing out kind of similar to the Damon Williams thing, except I think in this instance, I feel like and this is just kind of my analysis of it. I don't know this as a fact. I'm not act like this, or I'm not going to act like I'm reporting this as fact. But I think that Duke is kind of drawing this out because they want to get some sort of settlement. They want to guarantee that, hey, if we are going to lose our quarterback, if we're going to lose a player of extreme need who had already signed a contract with us, and who we were fully anticipating was going to be back next year, we are going to want some sort of or we're going to want some sort of compensation. So I would keep kind of a close, or we're going to keep kind of a close eye on this, sort of as things move forward. Um, I I do think that Mensa will ultimately end up being a Kane, but man, this is just I mean, we're in unprecedented territory. I'm not really sure what to say here. This isn't really a position that I can say that I've been in before, covering Miami or covering. Well, excuse me. I guess there was the Xavier Lucas thing last year, but this is a situation that I think is even more different than that. I think he'll end up at Miami, but I mean, man, the path to get there is going to be really, really unique.
I think Duke is trying to obviously draw that line in the sand that Washington did. I think if Duke's path to winning on this one would be he doesn't enroll in the spring and then they recoup their money, right? Like I don't think there's any world where this is like Damon Williams who ends up being like, you know what? I got bad advice and I'm going back, right? I don't know. That's me. I trying to read that one. What do you think?
Yeah, so I think that I was kind of sort of thinking along those lines too, and then I saw a really really interesting thread on Twitter last night that kind of had me sort of rethink some things. And this attorney pointed out that they would probably, or Duke and Mensa and Miami and really everyone involved would probably rather that this doesn't end up getting into court, because now you're going to be asking a judge to determine if these contracts that they sign are actually enforceable. And if they are actually enforceable, that probably means that they're going to have to formally be classified as university employees, which means that you're classifying these guys because a judge told you to do so, not because you were able to do it on your own timeline, and you're in control of everything. Yeah, I think that that's something that neither Miami nor Duke, sort of from a university standpoint, really want. Obviously, that's kind of been the thing, that's kind of been the thing that the NCAA has been trying to avoid for a really, really long time. At a certain point, I kind of feel like it's inevitable. I mean, we are ultimately going to get there at some point, but in terms of when we get there, I'm not really sure, and I don't think that universities really want to get there now because so far, sort of the NCAA's approach to this whole thing has just been, well, we're going to hold our breath and we're going to wait for Congress to step in and say us and give us an antitrust exemption. And Congress is simply not doing that. I mean, this went to the Supreme Court. It was struck down in a unanimous verdict. I mean, how many times in today's day and age of politics do we hear about a unanimous verdict where every single person agrees? That should kind of tell you something, that everyone agreed that this was egregious, and sort of the current political state and climate that we're in as far as Supreme Court justices go. But um, yeah, I do think that at the end of the day, he'll end up at Miami. But again, like I just said a minute ago, I think the road that they're going to take to get there is really going to be it's going to be kind of unique. And I think that this is ultimately going to end up getting settled outside of court, because I think if he ends up returning to Duke, that means Duke would probably need a judge to rule in their favor. And like I said, then you let the cat out of the bag with, I think, a ton of other things. So I think this probably ends in him going to Miami. But I've made sure not to go ahead and enter, a crystal ball or an RPM pick or any sort of, formal prediction for Mensa to end up at Kane, just in case, something shakes out a different way in court.
Do want to shout out Canes 266 and Terp 305. Look, on his tampering comment, only tampering if Miami gets a player. No, like that's not it. There's no problem with tampering on this show because the rules allow it. The issue is, are these contracts going to be, if you sign a guy for multiple years and you invest in him, is that going to be the case? And I think that's where college football fans are kind of like, all right, we want some sort of maybe roster. Like, don't you want to get to know the players like we all used to know the players year in, year out? That's kind of what a lot of people miss. And to Don 2260's point, Washington didn't even have to file a lawsuit. No, they were going to. And then Damon Williams said, I don't want to fight that. I want to go back to Washington. Again, he got bad advice. Let's move on from Darian Mensah, though, because Miami continues to make a lot of moves here. And Cooper Barcade is one that would not require a lawsuit here to get him on board, but is a really, really talented wide receiver who's got proven ACC production. Where would he fit in alongside, Malachi Toney and that wide receiver group for Miami that did see JoJo Trader enter the transfer portal as well, which I feel like could have seen the JoJo Trader move coming from a mile away too.
Yeah, I think with the Barcade, it's kind of a no-brainer. Yeah, Miami's going to be a team to watch here. I mean, it 1,000% makes the most sense. If his quarterback is going to go to the portal, I mean, how much sense would it make for his top receiver option to go ahead and follow him? Now, of course, some other schools are going to be involved, but if Miami gets Mensa, I would imagine that those end up being a package deal. And man, Barcade is a really, really, really freaking good player. I mean, when I was kind of looking at his film, it's like, man, like this is kind of the player that they thought that JoJo Trader was going to become. And he was him last year. I think he had something like 70 catches, 93 targets, 5 drops. I was looking at his PFF stuff yesterday. Separates really, really well. Not really one of these guys who's just going to have the straight line vertical speed to outrun you just in a straight line, and he's probably not going to be one of these guys who's going to win contested 50-50 jump balls every single time. But what he does really, really well is separate and catch the ball. And, that it's kind of the thing that Bill Belichick used to always look for. Hey, I don't care as much about your size, I don't care as much about your speed, your draft grades, all of this stuff, but can you separate and can you catch the football? And those are two things that I think Barcade does better than, just as well as, or better than, I mean, anyone in the ACC. I think he would fit in really, really well as either an X or a Z receiver. Miami is going to lose okay amount of talent or an okay amount of production in their receiver room this year with CJ Daniels and Keelan Marion. off to the NFL draft. Obviously, they're returning Malachi Tony. And then at the other receiver spot, I think that you're probably hoping that one of the other two portal guys that you brought in, maybe Cam Vaughn or Vandrevius Jacobs, or maybe some of these sophomores, redshirt freshmen, or even true freshmen are able to go ahead and step up at the other receiver spot. I think that it's possible again that along with Malachi Tony, Miami has two transfer receivers on the perimeter. I could see Cam Vaughn ending up starting on the perimeter. I could also see Vandrevius Jacobs from South Carolina, finding a way onto the field. But I could also see maybe a Samarian Wingo or a Dalen Upshaw, or a Josh Moore or a Milan Paris or a Vance Spafford or one of these other guys that they've brought up through high school recruiting. It wouldn't stun me if one of those guys just ends up winning the other job outright. But I think that Vaughn kind of is exactly what this offense needs, and that's kind of a savvy, experienced receiver on the outside. They got that in C.J. Daniels this year, but I think that Barcade is just far, far more advanced at this point in his career than Daniels was. He is certainly a lot more productive. He had more than 1,000 yards receiving last season. Tony, I think, had around 1,200 or so yards receiving last season. And obviously, you put those two guys on the field. Probably pretty unlikely that both of them end up being 1,000-yard receivers, and there's going to be a little bit of a target share between the two, or there's going to be it'll be a question, what the target share between the two is going to look like. But certainly you have to think that having Tony there is going to ease the burden on Barcade, and having Barcade there is going to ease the load on Tony. And you hope that that third receiver there is really able to find his way sort of into the mix and really fit into the offense as well. Overall, I think that Miami's in really, really good position to significantly upgrade their receiver room last year. Even though this year it was solid, I think next year could be really, really elite.
Can Miami land Colorado offensive tackle Jordan Seaton? What's the latest on your end?
Man, mining for Seaton, you might as well be trying to dig for diamonds in Fort Lauderdale. His camp has been completely tight. They are being very, very intentional to make sure that nothing gets out before they want it to get out. Yeah, I think kind of the case with most of us right now is, college staffers are making sure that there are not going to be any leaks about transfer portal players, especially as most of these teams are trying to prevent their own players from hitting the transfer portal. So I think that Miami absolutely can land Jordan Seaton. If I'm just giving you my analysis, yeah, Miami's in this thing. Miami is going to be in this thing, especially with Markel Bell, their right tackle, now off to the NFL. Miami's going to have a little bit of a budget to go into the portal and spend on a right tackle. And Miami absolutely could have landed Josiah Thompson from South Carolina earlier this month, and ultimately he ended up deciding to go ahead and go back to South Carolina. And coincidentally, not too long after that, Jordan Seaton decided that he was going into the portal, and Miami threw their hat in the ring. And I think that the Hurricanes really are going to have a very real shot here. We know that they're going to have the resources to do it. On the NIL side, I think they're probably in as good a position as they've ever been in. But then obviously, Colorado, or excuse me, not Colorado, Oregon and LSU are both going to be really, really heavy bidders for Seaton. Oregon really needs help on that offensive line. I know Lane Kiffin, he's getting greedy in the portal, man, but damn, is he good at it. He's brought in a great portal class already. I think getting someone like Seaton would sort of be the cherry on top. I kind of feel like with someone like Seaton, if he wants the bag, then he will go to whoever the highest bidder is. But man, whenever you look at Miami's offensive line this past year and the level of coaching that they received from Mario Cristobal and Alex Mirabal, if you're really seeking level of coaching and how to improve your draft stock and all those things, I really have a hard time seeing how you don't take a very, very long and serious look at Miami.
And you could have one of the best quarterbacks in the country back there as just we'll wrap up with this. Just quick comment here. Duke quarterback Darian Mensah has filed an emergency motion for reconsideration of the temporary restraining order against him, requesting his preliminary injunction hearing be moved from February 2nd to Friday. That's today, January 23rd. The court said, of course, this week that he can't enroll at another school before the injunction hearing. So he's trying to move this thing along, and we'll see if he's going to have Jordan Seaton, but he will have really talented offensive line nonetheless, the way Mario Cristobal is recruiting it. I saw Jackson Cantwell hanging out there at the national championship game as an early enrollee. So plenty to like about the direction of Miami's offensive line. Stephen Wagner of On3, Kane Sport, thanks for joining us this morning, man.
Thanks, Billy.
There you go. Stephen Wagner joining us on All Access AM. Appreciate you guys being here with us on this Friday. Usually we're live Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, 8 to 9 a.m. Eastern time. We ended up having to do a little travel changing around. So we're live on Friday, which worked out perfectly because that report about Darian Mensah coming from our own Pete Nakos just moments ago came across the timeline as I was watching this morning as the portal continues to heat up and Miami's going to be a big player in it. Do want to remind you guys to hit that subscribe button in the podcast episode description or scan the QR code in the upper corner of your screen right now. That helps us grow the channel. I've seen a few of you guys watching just this very moment subscribe to the channel. So thank you for doing that on our YouTube page as we continue to chase that really important 500 sub mark. And then we'll go on to 1,000 from there. But we appreciate Stephen Wagner joining us. ACC basketball this weekend. Couple notes here. The ACC did move some things around for Saturday. Wake Forest at Duke moved from 5:45 p.m. to noon. That's Eastern time. It's on the CW. North Carolina at Virginia, big game there. You have that moving from 2 p.m. to noon, now airing on ESPN2. Virginia Tech at Louisville moves from 3:45 p.m. to 2:15 p.m., airing on the CW. NC State at Pitt is a noon game. That's always what it's been, and it will now air on ESPNU. So all those times, Eastern time for the ACC, they move some things around. SMU is hosting FSU in another matchup here. This is going to be a really quiet Moody Coliseum, I would imagine, on Saturday at 3 p.m. Central, as Dallas is going to have a winter storm, and they will be hosting the Seminoles in this matchup. 14-5 overall, 3-3 in ACC play. SMU versus 8-11 Florida State, 1-5 in ACC play. The Seminoles did fly in. They are here in Dallas, so they are ready to go on Saturday. It will be snow, ice, all of the things, but all things here in Dallas do say that this game will be played. And as we get to the rest of this Saturday slate now for college basketball in the ACC, Wake Forest at Duke, 11 a.m. Again, Wake coming off that loss to SMU. You'd expect the Blue Devils to roll in Cameron Indoor. UNC facing off against UNC going on the road to face Virginia. Could be an interesting matchup here between the Hoos and the Tar Heels. The Tar Heels getting back on track earlier this week, of course, and then Virginia, I believe they had their bye this week, so they did not play a game during the week, so they are getting back to it after a little bit of a break there. And Clemson does head to Georgia Tech, looking to get back on track. You would think Tigers would win that one. Georgia Tech's not among the league's best by any means, but certainly a team that could get a little hot, especially with Clemson going away from Little John. You never know there. NC State heads to Pitt, looking to keep the momentum there off of that win at Clemson. Miami heads to Syracuse, looking to get back on track after their loss to Florida State. And then you've got Virginia Tech heading to number 23, Louisville, on that afternoon game. And that is one that, Louisville really kind of reeling right now in a kind of an interesting situation, 13-5 overall on the year. They're missing Michael Brown. I did not see an update before the show if he is going to be available for this one, but the Cards are certainly hoping to get him back into the fold here very soon. Them talking about his direction, trending in the right way as he has returned to practice, but his status is still unknown. They could certainly use him in that matchup against Virginia Tech, a really, really Virginia Tech team that has dealt with a lot of close losses, including that heartbreaker recently against SMU. That they're a competitive team. They'll play really hard and be ready to rock. BC heads to Notre Dame in an evening matchup, 5 p.m. Central Time on ACC Network. Cal at Stanford, 7 p.m. on ACC Network. Lucky for those two programs, they do not have to go into the winter storm travel across the country. Appreciate you guys. We've got Lenoris Murray, the U. Appreciate you jumping in the chat there. Make sure you're subscribed. Juan Manuel Ventura. I tamper with my neighbor's mangoes. I love it. I love it. College basketball is here. Football is unfortunately over, but we will not stop talking about football on this show. We are going to do all sorts of portal kind of recaps, team by team, try to dive into them, have some really interesting and fun shows. So make sure you jump in the comments and tell me what you'd like to see. This is that time of year where we're going to try to get coaches, players on the show and talk about their seasons. And Billy, am I doing the show in my garage? No, I'm not. This is my office. So this is the setup I've got. Got the bookcase going. I don't keep picture frames and memorabilia in the garage, but I appreciate the question, Juan Manuel. We'll definitely keep it going. By the way, the garage is cold right now, which I run hot, so that would be fine by me. But in the summer, I would be it would not be a pretty sight for you guys, even if we had some more professional lights in here. But we appreciate you guys being here, especially Juan Manuel. Thanks for jumping in the chat. Make sure you're subscribed to our All Access AM YouTube channel. Helps us grow the show. We've got a lot of fun playing for you guys, though, as college football is now winding down. It's now the world of way too early lists and what'd you get in the portal and how do you finish, if at all, in the National Signing Day date coming up in February. Do you add any more players from the high school ranks, or is it all portal? And you're getting guys checked in for the spring semester. You're getting out on the road, doing some recruiting before the dead period hits. So it is just kind of that final sprint for these college football coaches that, for the most part, thanks to the ACC having a bunch of bowl teams and a strong bowl season, went from the end of the season right into the high school recruiting and getting out on the road and seeing recruits, then meanwhile welcoming in transfers. It's a wild calendar. I don't envy these guys, but they get paid handsomely to do it, and it's fun for us to talk about too, so we appreciate that. Last question here from Juan. How are you shocked with the transfer portal has gone down seriously? I would say with the transfer portal, I shouldn't be surprised with the way college athletics has now gone with the things that are being allowed, as far as, okay, you get more years of eligibility, you get unlimited transfers, or you get this, or you get that. But meanwhile, we're enforcing still rules like, here's a portal window, here's when you can and can't enter. And by the way, grad transfers have to be in or out by a certain time. You don't have that factoring in as much. I'm sure somebody's going to try to challenge that after the spring. But my issue is if we're going to also sign contracts with these players, 1099 contracts, however you want to view them, and you're giving up NIL rights, or you're giving up this, or you're giving up that, and you're getting well compensated, well, let's have a little bit of stability in that regard. And I know that has to be probably collectively bargained at one point or the other, or that could involve Congress stepping in saying, hey, the NCAA is unique here. They're not employees, but they also can set their own contracts and enforce their own rules and do all those things. If we see a return to that, I don't think we're far off. But where the issue is we're thanks, Juan. Look, after the garage comment, I was wondering, but I appreciate this. You're making too much sense. We do have a world where college football fans, now more than ever, they want to win, right? You have this instant gratification transfer portal, being able to move in and out. you have the opportunity to go make money, and you have these schools that can throw money at it. Well, that obviously puts more pressure on coaches, that puts more pressure on universities to raise money, that should put more pressure on the players to produce at a high level. But schools don't release obviously how much these players make. So it would be really interesting where if we knew what players were making, would we see that shift to the NFL as far as some people being like, oh, I can't believe we paid XYZ player this when they're doing all of these things that aren't good enough for us to be where we want to be. And then how much of it is, okay, well, let's evaluate the general manager who signed that deal and how much of that is on the coach. Because we see the coach have a good roster and do well. Okay, how does that work? There are some things that need to be ironed out here because I don't think we're too far off from the right mix of, hey, we have these guidelines, these contracts that can be signed. Let's make sure they're enforceable. Let's make sure they're real. And then we'll have a little bit more stability in college football. And I wonder if, because contracts could then be enforced, would we see less of them for multi-year? Okay, that's fine. That's the free market doing its thing. Or would we see agents say, all right, I like my player, but let me get him into a 2-year deal here. That's good for me. That's good for him. Maybe we'll take a little bit less. And then you see a little bit more college football stability. And I would love to see more, let's say, accountability for how these rosters are built. You think about where FSU is right now, and you think about how they've built what they currently have. It's not talked about enough in terms of, Michael Alford having to answer questions around, this organizational setup they have. Hey, how is this Mike Norvell's roster? Is this, the new general manager coming in there? Those type of questions, like an owner of an NFL team might have to answer, they don't happen in college football. College football in general and college athletics is so cloaked in obscurity and, not talking about certain things. Well, now that we're in this whole situation, it's okay to call it tampering. And, some coach might stumble upon this show and say, God, man, the guy was just accusing us of tampering. No, the rules generally allow you to have some sort of ability to contact a player, whether it be a third party, whether it be a collective, whether it be a marketing agency. All of those things happen. So let's don't pretend that they don't happen. They happen. And don't make a big stink out of them happening because everybody has to hold on to their roster. But if that player you're going after has a 2-year deal, it should just be, oh, okay, yeah, well, all right, a 2-year deal. Okay, I guess that's the end. Instead, we're seeing a very public, ugly legal battle play out here. And hopefully it's over sooner rather than later. But you have this battle playing out between two ACC schools in the same conference. So it's frustrating in that regard. And I think a little bit more transparency around these programs in general would go a long way. And it would really be something that, look, if these players are going to get paid, and I would imagine you could really go dive into certain things as far as trying to find out how much money players make and things like that. But it's still early in the coverage phase of it. I think that people are learning where to go, what is going to be really frowned upon, what is going to be really looked down upon by colleges, and then does that impact your ability to actually cover as the gatekeepers of that? Because the NFL just has so many really rules in place through collective bargaining that make it such a business and very transactional and doing all those things. So the college sports space needs a little bit more of that. We're getting there, but it's still things like the Damon Williams situation, things like the Darian Mensah situation just aren't good. They're not good for the sport because they're moving all of these pieces around that should otherwise have rules in place. Like, I don't think we should have a lawless system. And that's where the challenges here are trying to take people that are trying to at least have a set of rules and guidelines in place and flip them on their head and it just ends up being, I just think it ends up hurting people more than you think. And that's not me saying Miami shouldn't be doing what they're doing, because the rules kind of allow it. And that's not me trying to side with Duke, because if Duke ends up losing this over something in the contract that wasn't ironclad, then that's on Duke. So it's just a no win at the end of the day, though, because you do have, these guys that, just kind of push the envelope. And there are other ways to push the envelope, like recruit the quarterback position better out of high school, or, just go ahead and address your roster earlier when you have a quarterback who's actually leaving the program, no matter what, Carson Beck, go out and address the roster earlier at such a key position. It just, and I know that again comes back to something that can be fixed, which is the calendar. So the calendar is what the calendar is for college football playoff teams that get into the semifinals and national championship, at least as of now. So happy Valentine's Day, everyone. 2027. That's when the national championship is. Silly, silly, silly. But or actually, it's not Valentine's Day, is it? That's Super Bowl Sunday. But that reminds me, do you think we will see two super conferences like Big Ten versus SEC, like NFL is AFC versus NFC? I don't think so, because at least as of now, you have these conferences that just want to be the big conferences that they are. And until somebody comes up with the more the NFL divisional model, and then the playoff gets changed to another scenario, like how do we work that out? So that's why I say no to two super conferences. I think the more likely thing would be, okay, does everybody get their one media rights under one house? And that's where maybe there's a commissioner, NCAA, and then you have four divisions of sorts versus conferences, and you could still name them what they are, but got to get some things figured out before I think we see the conferences get any bigger. If anything, you're seeing these conferences be like, oh, great, we're huge now, but also, God, we're beating each other up. Our product is diminished a little bit here. We don't play everybody. We get teams that have kind of poor situations as far as strength of schedule some years. Like you look at Texas A&M this year, and so if anything, you need these big conferences to go to 10 conference games, and then what do you do there? So there are all sorts of things that got to be figured out in the next 4 years, heading towards that 2030 group of deadlines. So anyway, everybody, I appreciate you guys. We're here Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. We'll get back on track next week. 7 to 8 a.m. Central Time, 8 to 9 a.m. Eastern Time. I appreciate Juan Manuel Ventura for jumping in and being so active in the comments. Appreciate that a lot. And you guys, too, can subscribe to the channel, All Access AM. Just Google it, All Access AM. On YouTube, we're really focused on the ACC, college football, basketball, and obviously Portal right now. So lots of things to discuss for you ACC fans out there. Appreciate all the interaction and the chat on this Friday. Hope everybody stays warm and stays safe across the country with a lot of this weather moving through. So appreciate all of you guys joining us on All Access AM this morning. We'll see you Monday morning. I'm Billy Embody. Thanks for joining us.